So, Rex, I am so excited that you have come to spend this afternoon with me, and you've offered to give me some time to share your story, which I don't even know that much about, but I do know that you have been through many years of alcohol abuse and recovery. And I know that that has also led you into so many other directions, which we're not going to be able to cover today in our conversation, but it's certainly something that I want to open up later if you'll come back and chat with me. But I'm just really, really full of admiration for you, for somebody who can have gone through what you've gone through, bought yourself out, and have decided to really go and pursue so many different avenues and ideas and things in your life, which I think has sounded really, really exciting. So what I'd love to do with you this afternoon is just to ask you if you would share with us maybe what happened, what was the catalyst to put you in that situation, but very importantly, obviously, for people that might tune into this, to understand that it is possible and what it was that you held on to, or what decisions you made, or what journey you took to bring yourself to where you are today. Okay. So I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay, Amanda, thanks very much. It's a very light-hearted, very nice atmosphere. So thanks very much for this.
Pleasure.
You know, it's also interesting. I write a lot, and I've actually written a book. Well, in fact, I've written two, but written a book concerning my life, which covers about 50 odd years.
Wow. Okay.
But it's very different actually talking as I'm doing, or as we are doing at the moment, talking with somebody about it rather than writing it down and putting the words out there. So this is very, very interesting. And I won't say it's the first time it's happened, but it hasn't happened that many times. And I think each time it happens, something new comes out. So I really value this. And this is where I think you're doing a great thing, Amanda. Conversations with people, because isn't life about conversations? I really think it is. Absolutely. And I don't think there are actually enough of it, but hang on, let me not go into that too much.
Well, we're going to have lots more, I hope, Rex, anyway.
I'm certainly open to that. Okay, so just a little bit about me, and I think it's important to go into some of my background, not for too long though. So I was one of those guys who was quite talented at school. I did very well at cricket and rugby, those two sports particularly, and yeah, I did very well at school in those, and in a leadership position at school. Then we did army training in those days. I was an officer in the army, something to do with leadership, and that was ridiculous because I do. This is not being humble, this is being truthful. Probably one of the worst soldiers South Africa's produced, I think. I'm actually quite proud of that. But anyway, that's also another matter.
Sounds like that's definitely a conversation.
If I can remember. Anyway, and then I went on to Stellenbosch, and my first 2 years at Stellenbosch were also pretty successful, not on the academic front. I've never been, I'll get onto that just now. So I did pretty well in cricket and rugby at Stellenbosch as well. And that was an era when there were a lot of very top class rugby players. I wasn't in their league, but I did pretty well. So cricket and rugby, and I never at school, I didn't used to drink. At the end of the year, the trick party, had a couple of drinks, and I drank more probably than the other guys did. So I think there's always been that sort of inclination. The army, I drank a lot, but that was kind of basking in the glory that I'd just come from at school. And so there were no responsibilities as such. So I just went crazy and drank a lot and still did quite well. Similarly at Stellenbosch, I drank a lot at Stellenbosch, but it was always sort of under control, still doing well. And then from the second year onwards, it got out of hand. My sport declined. And then I'll kind of rush through this a little bit because I can't go through about 110 jobs, which I probably had. It wasn't 110, but it was many tens of jobs. The longest one ever was the longest one, which was from 1987 to 1994, 7 years, the longest by far. So I never felt comfortable or felt that I wanted to achieve anything in the business world. That was never for me. And
can I just ask you a question, Rex? So, but when you say it got worse, what do you think prompted that? What do you think caused that? Was it, well, I don't want to say to you what I thought it might be, but
no, you're welcome to say what.
I don't know. Is it something to do with maybe just not having a direction at that point, or?
I think that's probably got a lot to do with it, Amanda. You probably hit it on the head there, because I registered to do BCom law at Stellenbosch, Why? Just because a couple of my older friends were doing law, and I thought, that sounds like a good idea. And vocational guidance at school, I said I wanted to do law. Whoever the person was guiding me as such said, you should be doing law, so I did law. I was never interested in it. I never had any idea what I was going to do with it. It just sounded like a nice idea. But none of the subjects, certainly at school, I wasn't interested in any of the subjects that I did, not one. And similarly at Stellenbosch, I was a little bit interested in political science, but otherwise it wasn't interesting whatsoever. So yes, direction.
It was an escape. Was it a bit of an escape thing, do you think? Or something to do? Or...
Well, I was having a good time, and I'm sort of kind of fun-loving, and it fitted in well with my sport. It was the era of we drank after sport. We took sport very seriously, but we always gathered after sport in the clubhouse and with our opponents afterwards. It's very much a part of it. And we still did very well. So there's a lot of dedication off the field, on the field, and then partying afterwards. But I think there was probably that emptiness, and was probably unconscious. What am I doing? Why? What should I be doing? Yes. And that continued for a long time. Although I've always had an interest in philosophy and psychology, and so I've read literally hundreds, possibly thousands of books in that direction, and spirituality and that sort of thing. So never anything to do with subjects that I would have done at Stellenbosch. Looking back, no regrets at all, but if I'd been advised correctly, psychology and philosophy would have been it. So I think you're absolutely right, a lack of direction. And then afterwards, just as addiction can happen, it just got completely out of control. Yes. And then it wasn't a question of, I wonder what I should be doing. It's just, I need to have a drink, and here we go. And so, when I mentioned about alcohol abuse, it was serious stuff towards the end, or not even towards the end, in the middle and the end. I mean, I would drink at 3 o'clock in the morning, pass out, wake up a few hours later, drink again. And this could happen 3 or 4 times a day for weeks on end. Sure. And then I would stop completely, and I would recover very quickly. And I think this is one of the things where I've been very fortunate, and it's one of the aspects that I think is important. Whenever I stopped drinking, with immediate effect, virtually, I would get out and go running or go walking in the mountains. So a combination of nature and exercise was always what I did. Amazing that you had that ability, though, just to not drink, just like that, was it? Just like that, that's absolutely. So what, you'd wake up and that would be that, you'd say, right, that's it? Yes, until later on, when the stage got much, much worse, when that was not possible. That I couldn't actually do that. In fact, often I remember I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, think, today I'm not going to drink. But then it felt like I was having a heart attack. And the only thing that I could do was have a drink. And then, fortunately, at a later stage, I got having Valium instead of alcohol. So that, of course, helped, because then I didn't have to have alcohol the next day. I could have Valium the next day. Sure. And so that improved things. So, I mean, it was... really dramatic. And a lot of my friends who do see me at the moment, and they actually never saw me at my worst, because I would hide myself away. But they call it a miracle, and I think it's actually true, that I am where I am at the moment. So how many years did that go on for then? And did it progressively just get worse and worse? Yeah, it got worse and worse and worse until in 2008. So I would have been 50 odd. I was still drinking at that stage, and then I met a lady on a hike and fell madly in love with her, absolutely and totally and almost irrevocably. And then she didn't drink much, and I didn't drink much because I didn't have to. There was nothing that I sort of needed, and so because of the way you were feeling. Yeah, absolutely. So it is very much about just numbing one's, because that's what I read about. Sure. That people who have an addiction of some kind, that it's often just to escape themselves. Yes. And escape the feelings they don't want to feel. Yeah. And I think probably loneliness was very much a part of that, although I don't think I would have ever admitted that, or possibly even still to a lesser extent. But I think that is very true. So anyway, just getting on to that story. So we were crazy in love, and only for 6 months. And I was so extremely happy that on one occasion towards the end of that period, I went off. And being so happy, I wanted to celebrate. And I think I was doing house sitting. So how was I going to celebrate? Oh, no. Okay, let me have a bottle of wine. And I had another bottle of wine, another bottle of wine. And eventually, it was obvious to her, because I said, I've got I've got food poisoning. We can't sort of see each other just at the moment. But she realized it was alcohol poisoning. So she called it off. Now, in the past, that would have been the perfect trigger to get back onto the bottle and probably sort of just go crazy until the end of the life.
Yes.
I didn't do that. I didn't drink again. So that for me, and this is a very, very important point for me, that love actually was the reason why I stopped drinking. Love. However, I did realize that because she had called it off, it wasn't romantic or kind of human being surface sort of love. I'm not sure how else to put it at the moment, but some other deeper mystical love that must be doing this, like an inner love. Now I'm still exploring that at the moment, but it was that.
You know, Rex, isn't it sad for us in some ways that the self-love wasn't there? Sure. Because that we can love outwardly and we can give love to somebody else, and that can cause us to want to make the change, but yet we don't feel worthy and we don't feel enough love for ourselves to think, I want to do this for me. It's to do it for somebody else, sure. Isn't it?
Yeah, and that's very interesting because, I've never thought really, or I didn't think really in terms of not loving myself, but it must be that. It must be that, otherwise why would that behavior have kicked in?
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, so then interestingly, I didn't drink again, and that was 2008. There'd been, I think it was 2014, I went up, and this is quite an interesting story, but I won't go into the details. And a friend of mine and he does a lot of personal development work in corporates, and we were talking about recovery and so on. And we were talking about...
Close this door, I apologize. Carry on. Sorry, just 1 second.
Sure.
Because we've got little children screaming.
Sure, and that's what little children do, don't they? So.
Well, let me just do that so we can hear you better.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. If I start crying like that, then something's gone wrong.
No, then I'll worry.
Yeah.
Sorry, now I've thrown you off your school of thought. You were talking about...
Slightly. Let me just see if I can get back to it. Yes, so 2014, I think it was, and this friend of mine and I, we were talking about recovery and AA and 12 steps and that sort of thing. Now, whatever I say is definitely not anti-AA. But for me, AA never sat well with me. And one of the main things was saying I am an alcoholic, because I think that's and there's a lot more to be said about this, so this may not come across that well, but I think it's a very limiting thing to say I am an alcoholic. Apart from the fact that I was an alcoholic, yes, I'm not an alcoholic anymore. That's the way I was behaving. And so this is why I call myself being beyond recovery, that I don't even think in terms of alcoholism, or I was an alcoholic, or I am an alcoholic. I'm beyond recovery. But that's so we're talking about that, and then he said, wouldn't it be interesting, because he had an idea that, what did he call it, the gold award is what I had kind of achieved, stopping drinking, but the platinum award, he called it, was if you can still drink. But
really?
But
controlled.
But controlled. Now, of course, alcoholics and people in recovery will laugh at that, because that's what we've all done and said, I'm sure I can do it controlled. That's why we take such a long time to give up. But so I said, okay, well, I'm going to do what is called the drinking experiment. And I wrote basically every day for about 2.5 years as if I were drinking. And I called it the drinking experiment. I was going to bring out a book. And it was very interesting because whenever I wrote, the subject was alcohol, obviously, I felt a downturn in my energy. It was very interesting indeed. But I'd say last night I went out with my friends. I had 2 beers, absolutely fine. We had a good time, no problem at all. And then a week later, I went out, I had too much. I'm really not feeling.
But did you literally go out and do this?
No, not at all. This is pure fantasy.
Okay. So you journal, you write and journal about it.
That's right. And then, so that every day for about 2.5 years. And then at the end of that, I thought, this is very interesting. I think the sort of higher part of the I, have advanced quite a lot. It's not the same me that it was who drank 2.5 years ago. And I decided there and then to put the experiment into actual physical operation.
Oh, okay.
Then I decided, so that was, I think, 2016, something like that. I decided, okay, I'm going to put it into practice now. And it was testing my personal hypothesis that the I now is not the same as the I then, and possibly, I'm going to check if it actually can handle alcohol, because I thought it could. As it turned out, it couldn't. It had exactly the same effect. And I can't.
So you meaning you went back?
Yeah. And drinking, it started off fairly slowly. I'd go out and have one glass of wine, then two, and then eventually I got to exactly where I was at my very worst.
Wow.
My very, very worst. And then my brother and sister-in-law came around to where I was staying one morning, and I was about to go out and buy another bottle of wine, and they saw the condition that I was in, and they commanded me to go to their home. Well, I said, I have to have a drink. I took a bottle or two of wine with me, so it went off it fairly slowly since that day. And I don't know what it is because I don't count the days, actually. I haven't drunk.
Wow.
And that's final, that I know.
So there was the sort of hypothetical scenario.
Yes.
And then there was the real scenario.
The real, that's right. Yeah.
And actually you couldn't, I mean, it wouldn't have worked, the hypothetical one.
Well, it didn't work. It went exactly as bad as it had.
And that's what they
before.
say, is it?
Absolutely.
In AA or in,
yeah, they
in
do
recovery.
say if you go start again, you start off at where you left off, the most bottom. And in my case, it was very true. So I might say it was a purely hypothetical thing, but still there was ego involved, because my ego must have been saying, I just want to test if I can do it. I just want to make sure that I can or can't drink.
Well, you're testing a theory, aren't you?
Yes,
I mean, it's like
yeah.
anybody that creates something and tests a theory. But
yeah, so it didn't work. And so then that was the last time that I drank, and I don't know when it was because I don't count birthdays or.
And did you just, because you said to me earlier that you know, as you said to us all earlier, that you could just wake up and stop. So is that what you did then?
Well, at that stage, I hadn't reached where I had to have alcohol sort of at 3 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't quite got to that point, but it was very close by. So as soon as, and as I mentioned, I took a bottle or 3 or 2, whatever it was, with me to my brother and sister-in-law's place. So I drank that over, I think it was actually just over that day, not even the next day. And then I was fine. I did recover that quickly. And
did you work with yourself only in your recovery? So you weren't with AA or with any other organization or group to get through your recovery then?
Well, I was doing academic work with a friend of mine who's no longer alive, unfortunately. And he was very much an AA and a 12-stepper. And I went with him to AA, but it never grabbed me. I never felt at home there. And I knew that I think I knew that I wasn't going to remain sort of an AA follower. Once again, I repeat, AA is fantastic. It saved millions of people's lives,
sure, but not is it for everybody? Yeah, not necessarily, because I know somebody else who also wasn't able to continue with rehab because it didn't sit with them.
Yeah.
And I think that if you don't, it's like anything, if you don't believe in it,
yes,
or you can't buy into it, it doesn't feel right, then it's not going to be of any value. But I know, Rex, that just from our conversations and times that we've spent together, I know that after this recovery, I mean, you've done so many and explored many things. So what sort of, because you've taken something completely total adversity and you really managed to turn, which is what I really want all these conversations with the people I'm having, because I think it's so powerful and so inspiring.
Sure.
So you went through that recovery, and what did you decide to do? How do you think you've used what you went through to propel yourself into all these other, or some of these other things? Or
well, I think that's definitely been a large part of it, Amanda. I mean, I've always been interested in personal development, and I don't think I would have called it that many years ago. But as I mentioned, I've never been interested in other subjects at school or at university. But I've always been interested in, who am I, why am I, what am I, what am I all about, sort of thing. Probably not that deep at that stage, but it's about self-exploration rather than external exploration. So I've always been interested in that.
And certainly. You've never, have you ever spent time, I don't know, because some people say they do and some people say they don't, in looking back, or you don't believe in that? Because some people do, not to blame, but to use as maybe in an acceleration forward. I mean, looking back in the past as what caused that, or you don't believe in that?
And I won't say I don't believe in it. I think that's maybe a little bit strong. In my case, I know exactly what I did, and I know exactly what I shouldn't do again. And I think one of the things, touching on that, one of the things about A was I would go to an A, and every week I'd hear the same people telling the same stories. And I thought, I don't want to hear this over and over and over again. And I know there's an aspect to it that they tell the stories so that they can help other people who may be in a similar situation. I accept that fully. But I don't think from a personal point of view that is such a very good idea, because it's like, again, this is my opinion. It's just an opinion which I probably shouldn't have, but it's an opinion
No,
that
you must have.
no, I didn't, not necessarily, but that's for another time. But anyway, and that is, some psychotherapy, I think, can just go on and on and on and on and delve deeper and deeper into the bad, dark, ugly stuff, and sort of almost get stuck there. And I think, let's find out what that was. Let's get rid of it. Let's actually focus. And this has always been my thing.
Fall into that huge hole.
No, it's always been my take. Let's focus on the positive. What can I do? Because I think as soon as one focuses on positive energy, the negative energy, which is alcoholism, the bad dark days, that diminishes. The energy of it gets less and less, and the positive energy takes over. So possibly ultimately, if there were one thing that, if you were to ask me, what's the big thing in your life? Attitude, I would say. A positive attitude, believing that, because I've always thought I want to better myself, but at the same time, I'd like to help other people as well. So it's that attitude of, and I think faith comes into it as well, but that's not a religious faith. Actually, it's, well, it might or it might not be, but it's faith that there's a reason to actually better myself. That why do I wake up in the morning? Because there's a reason to do that.
Yes.
There's something that's greater than I am. I haven't a clue what it is. Well, but maybe I've got clues, but yeah.
No, I was just going to say that I do think sharing our story is really just to show the hope to somebody, because I think sometimes people don't know where to begin.
Sure.
And to hear a story of somebody who has made the change and is living, life without alcohol, that it's I think what it does is it shows you that it's possible.
Sure.
Number one,
yeah.
Doesn't mean to say that everybody's going to do it the same way or follow the same recovery route as such.
Yeah.
But so I do think sharing one story, and I thank you for that, because that's really what this is about.
Sure.
But if people were listening to our conversation today, who maybe have had your kind of experience or not been able to, get back on the road or whatever it is, I mean, what would you sort of say to somebody? What would be your I mean, you can recommend, I know that, but I mean, what would you say to somebody about the steps to do, or what to do next? Or so you say, talk about personal development, for instance. Was that a really big part of what you think has kept you the way you are and helped you to grow, or was it something that was just at that point really relevant for you to be able to spring out of where you were at?
No, it was a longer process, and that was very interesting and a good question. Maybe that for a further conversation at some stage, because I have an acronym which is called SANE MAP, SANE MAP, and SANE is a very interesting word because it's used in AA circles a lot, sane and sanity. And so in SANE MAP, there are seven aspects that I talk about that helped me through the whole addictive process. It didn't get me to stop eventually, but it certainly kept me healthy, alive, and able to be where I am at the moment. So I think those steps, and can be spoken about if you're interested at some stage, very important, but it's not the ultimate. That I think follows, but one needs to be in a certain sort of condition and stage to be able to say, okay, yeah, I think I can do this. I think I'm going to go further, rather than just saying, I hope I'm not going to drink tomorrow. I hope I'm not going to drink tomorrow, which is what a lot of people still do. And that, it's 24 hours at a time, and that's fine. But being beyond recovery, I think there's immense freedom in it, which is why I'm so big on it.
And that's what your passion is now.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know that you're very healthy in the sense that you have a very outdoor, you run, because I'm always bumping into you when you're out running, and I'm walking.
That's fine. I think walking's very good.
But you're very much an outdoor person. Yes. You really enjoy living in a healthy and nature environment.
Yes.
And you feel, as far as I understand it, that's a very important element as well.
For sure.
In your whole being, and everyone's being, really. But you talk a lot about your beyond recovery. Is this something that you are working on or with, or have got some program that you are going to launch or talk to people about eventually? Or?
I've got a number of programs, actually, Amanda, a couple of things, things that I've worked on. In fact, it's a bit alarming because I've probably got thousands of pages of stuff, but there are some programs that are completed. And it's all, I guess, come out of the fact that I did what I did do. I wouldn't have had the time to do this if I'd become a successful advocate or something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Or got married and had kids and had to take them, you know.
Yes.
So this was possibly, if there's such thing as meant to be, it was probably meant to be so that I could do this, so that I could play this role, if there is any sort of positive role that I can play. So certainly, you know, I prefer not to tell people what they should, or maybe even maybe what they could do, maybe. But I think it's a question of, if they're interested in improving themselves, certainly having a conversation, having a chat like you and I are doing, I think is, I won't say it's essential, but it's very, very useful, because this is really where deep inner work goes. And I think the work has to be inner, because it's not out there somewhere. It's actually within each of us. And I think a lot of people don't really realize that. You know, and again, if one has to rely on an external organization or people or an external method, you know, that's still external. It's not inner.
And it's also a bit of a crutch, isn't it, as well?
I think so.
So if that fell away, what would happen?
What then? Yes.
And I think in some ways, I mean, I think it's beautiful, that part of your story where you say you met this woman and you just absolutely were in love, because absolutely that was the start of you wanting to be in recovery and, and to get better, or whatever the word would be. But again, that also, in a sense, is a crutch.
Absolutely.
Because of what followed for you after that. So, you know, for me, it's always about, I always think it's trying to help people love themselves enough to know that they're worthy, because we see so much goodness in everybody else, and we you know, and yet we also have that within us. And I think it's so sad sometimes that we can spend hours with somebody helping them to see the goodness in themselves and overcome something, and yet we don't put ourselves through the same situation.
Sure, absolutely.
It's just so interesting how we constantly deflect from ourselves and our greatness.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
And that's what I really love about these conversations, because I just think everybody's got something to give and to offer, and often it is through adversity, because as I've said in some of my other conversations, that I believe that growth only comes through the harder times. Because when we're all happy and in a comfortable situation, we don't have a need to grow.
No, that's right. There's that little saying, which is something like, where we stumble and fall is where we grow the most.
Yes.
And I think that's very true, because we can either just carry on lying there, or we can sort of stumble up and complain and groan and fall, or we can get up and say, oh, I didn't like that, but and I might fall again, but I'm getting up, I'm going to try.
So how long now have you been fully recovered?
Don't know, Amanda. I don't count, but since 2016 or 17, I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fantastic. And I mean, are you somebody who would be open if somebody else came to you and said to you they're struggling?
Absolutely. Oh, no, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, you know, I know exactly what it's like to be really down there. So, and I think that's important, because I think quite often if a person goes to if you're suffering from an addiction of some nature, go to a psychiatrist, for example, and that person hasn't actually been through it him or herself, I'm not sure that person, you can go through all the theories and so on, but if you haven't experienced it yourself, and that applies to any sort of adversity in life. I think if that person has been there, then we can empathize.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's where empathy comes from, because without that, you can't have empathy, really, because you have no understanding of what it feels like to be there. Well, I just think that's amazing what you've been through, and I'm very excited to ask you to come and have another conversation with me about some of the other wonderful things that you are doing. And I know you've spoken to me about potentially offering hiking trips for anybody who's interested in going to be listening. I know you've got your Beyond Recovery and some courses that you're going to be launching. So there's a lot of great things going to come out of this.
Sure.
And so because one of the things I really would love to do is to ask you maybe to do just a couple of minutes on your own at some stage that we could put up, just talking about maybe your hiking or your Beyond Recovery or something. But if anybody is listening or taps into this and they felt, oh my goodness, I've listened to Rex's story and I just know that this is something that could maybe help me or help somebody else, that then they would know how to get hold of you and to contact you and to take the next steps. Absolutely loving it.
More than happy to do that. In fact, I guess that's why I'm here.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I enjoy doing it anyway.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I know you've got some podcasts.
Yes, I do have.
Do you want to just touch on those a bit?
I haven't actually done them for a while, so
Okay.
I can't even remember. I think it's called Talk with Rex. Is the let me give you those details.
Yes.
I'm
that's
sure.
lovely.
Yeah.
It's lovely to think that even as we mature in age, because that's what this is really about for me. We mature in age, and yet, there's still so much to do and so much to explore.
Absolutely.
And I think the more that we can all network with each other and expose each other to other things and what we do to people and things like that, that's for me what networking is all about.
No, I think so. And you're absolutely right. I think we learn from each other, which is why these conversations are important, because even though somebody else might be having a conversation with you which is completely different to my experience, I'm still going to pick something up from it, whatever it is. And likewise with this. So there's always something that we can all learn from everybody else's story.
Yeah.
And that's why I think stories are important too. Our lives are our stories after all, and I think we need to tell them, and we need to be listened to.
Yes.
That for another time.
No, definitely. I think that we often don't think that our story brings value or has value or is important enough, but we're so wrong. And especially I think today, where we have social media, and social media just portrays this perfection, that everybody's living this wonderful, happy, amazing life, and which is not the case. I mean, obviously it's not the case. And but when we hear that somebody goes through some trials and tribulations, and it's not that we want to spend hours dwelling in that, but it's for me always, how did they come out of that? What did they hold on to? What propelled them? What was the catalyst that got them to want to take the next steps? And where did it take them as well? That to me is like a rags to riches story, which I just love. I love all that kind of thing. So fantastic. So Rex, thank you very, very much. It's been really fantastic. And I know we've got hours more that we could talk about, but we will definitely do it again.
No, for sure. And Amanda, thank you very much indeed. I've really enjoyed it. In fact, so much so that if you don't invite me again, you're probably going to be quite angry, and I don't get angry easily.
We're knocking on my door and just coming back anyway. Well, I welcome it. Okay.
Excellent.
Thanks so much,
thank
Rex.
You very
I really
much,
appreciate it.
And all the best with your conversations with Amanda J.
Thank you very, very, very much. Thanks, Rex.
Bye now.
Bye.